1798 is a key year for English Romanticism. In fact, this is the year of the publication of the lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. In the preface, specifically in the second edition in 1800, we have the principles on composition of poetry. That's fundamental for the change that it had from the classical to the Romantic age. Some characteristics. The language of poetry, in some way, should go back to what is the language of ordinary people, because it is unspoiled, because it is nearer to nature. And against the poetic diction that was used up to then, I mean, poetic diction, we mean artificial or elevated kind of language, which only the learned people could understand, and also against the rationalist content of the Augustan poets. So, in some way, they wanted a return to the imagination, to the legend, to the feelings, to the human heart in some way. And the poet was seen as a prophet. In other words, he had the key to understand the hidden mysteries of the world. If we see a line by Shelley, where he says, poets are the trumpets which sing to battle. Poets are the unacknowledged legislation of the world. Now, thanks to imagination, the Romantic poets could see beyond the surface of reality and discover a truth that was beyond the power of reason. It was a kind of an almost divine faculty, and imagination allowed the poet to recreate the external world of experience. Now, the poet was seen as a visionary prophet, as we have seen with William Blake. But anyway, in general, he was a teacher whose task was to mediate between man and nature. Now, Wordsworth's attitude to nature is original and remarkable. Nature is seen as a great teacher of morals and the prime bringer of happiness. Nature was regarded also as a living force, and in a pantheistic view, as the expression of God in the universe. Wordsworth in some way shared Rousseau's faith in the goodness of nature, as well as in the excellence of the child. His uncorrupted sensitiveness meant he was even closer to God and the sources of creation. Therefore, childhood was a state to be admired and cultivated. There was a new emphasis on the significance of the individual. As in the present age, the Augustans have seen man as a social animal, the Romantics instead saw him as a solitary, in a solitary state. Jean-Jacques Rousseau exalted the natural behavior of the individual through the idea of le bon sauvage. And as a child, also the simple folk, the rural people who live in the age of nature, are pure, are wise, and their language is surely less corrupt. In a line by Wordsworth, we hear that the child is father of the man. This highlights again the importance of childhood, because he is nearer to nature. and as in nature there is God, he is nearer to God. The first contact with nature lead to simple thoughts in Wordsworth's. For example, when he says, "I wandered lonely as a cloud, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils." Simple image of something that he sees all of a sudden. But then he combines these simple ideas into a complex and a more organized ideas through recollected sensations. When he says, "For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude." Memory, therefore, is a major force and allows Wordsworth to give poetry its life and its force. For Wordsworth, as we have seen, imagination was synonymous with intuition, the power to see deep inside the life of things. All genuine poetry, according to him, takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Remember that pensive mode while he was lying on his couch. Through the recreative power of memory, the emotion is purified in poetic diction. On the other hand, Coleridge's contribution to Romantic poetry is found in a return to the magical and supernatural. And unlike Wordsworth, Coleridge did not view nature as a moral guide or a source of consolation and happiness. He ventured into the realm of the marvelous, and his contemplation of nature was always accompanied by the awareness of the presence of the ideal in the real. Nature had an essential role in poetic creativity. In nature, he found symbols that could reflect his emotions and his feelings. For example, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, the most important work by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, that was included in the collection of the lyrical ballads. In the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, we have three maybe different interpretations of it before we go a bit deeper in its analysis. For example, it has been seen as the description of a dream, or it can be also an allegory of the life of the soul from a Christian point of view, or a description of a journey of the Romantic poet. Now, the rhyme is a narrative poem in an archaic ballad form. Coleridge uses the ballad form to reflect the romantic interest in the medieval world, the medieval past, and the traditional themes of the supernatural events that were important in that period. The poem is rich, in fact, in sound effect as onomatopoeia, internal rhyme, alliteration, archaic words, symbols, and personifications. What we see more is that they contribute to create a kind of hypnotic atmosphere, as for example at the beginning of the poem, when the wedding guest cannot choose but hear the mariner's tales, where he is there freezed by his hypnotic eye. There is a constant also juxtaposition of the ordinary experience and the supernatural events. Now, the presence of a moral at the end of the poem, when he says, "A sadder and a wiser man, he rose the morrow morn," well, this makes the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner a romantic ballad. But we were talking about these characteristics of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. It's a good thing to have a look at some lines to see where and how these were organized. For example, when we speak about the onomatopoeic sounds and the repetitions, we can go back to this these fundamental lines when it says, "The eyes was here, the eyes was there, the eyes was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled." Oh, it's fundamental. It gives you the sensation of the breaking of the ice. Together with repetition, there's also an important role of alliteration. Repetition with water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. Were, as you can see. The internal rhyme also has an important role in the atmosphere, but also in the rhythm that the line gives to the poem. Internal rhyme and the alliteration are so much important in the organization of the rhyme. When it says, "The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into that silent sea." Great, as you can see, the sound of that brings us directly into this magical atmosphere of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Similes also, as we have said, are important. When we say, "as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean." Personification still, the sun now rose upon the right, out of the sea came he. Or archaisms, for example, "it is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth," not stops, "and he stoppeth one of three." Thou and I instead of you and your. Quoth instead of said, or spake instead of spoke. Kirk instead of church. So his idea of imagination and the role he gave to the supernatural events completed and integrated what we generally call the manifesto of English Romanticism. After the unfinished poems, the jewels, we can say, of English poetry of Christabel and Kubla Khan, he produced Biographia Literaria, where he explained the dual task which he and Wordsworth had set themselves in the lyrical ballads. That means that in contrast to Wordsworth's preoccupation with the subjects from the ordinary, real, natural life, Coleridge's task was to write about the extraordinary events in a credible way.